Welcome back, Bat Family, to another The Batman video, and today we're doing something in which I don't think I've done for almost a year now, and that is another retrospective The Batman video, and where we go over some making of clips, if you will, dive into the commentaries from Matt Reeves to Robert Pattinson and whatnot, and just overall, as kind of in a name, go over a bit of retrospective to somewhat fill the hype train, which is kind of running empty right now on our way to the Batman Part 2. I thought, hey, let's just do a bonus video in between the Batman discussion series episodes, which are on the channel, which you should definitely check out if you're brand new here. They go up like every 4 to 8 weeks. I would love to get you guys involved down in the comments below, because with stuff like this, it's hard to not comment and speculate on ideas for what I would like to see happen in the Batman Part 2. So without wasting any more time, just go ahead and leave a like on this video if you do go on to enjoy it, and consider subscribing for more videos like this. And also let me know if you want to see more stuff like this, because again, according to my upload history, it's been just over 10-11 months since I uploaded my last one of these. So if you like it, there will be more to come. But let's start off with Matt Reeves on creating the Batman, and then we're going to get into a bit of wingsuit stuff, I believe.
Rolling. Hey, Tina.
Right, already got a pause right there. I have to go back just a split second. To anyone who says that they don't like this suit, look, you can have your opinion. It's fine. No, you can't. No, you can't. I don't get it. Look how badass he looks in this suit in just some B-roll here as they're lining it up. I don't get it. Like, this is probably going to be a lot of this reaction is me just gushing over. Some of my favorite stuff, by the way, is looking at scenes, like B-roll scenes of kind of special features stuff, and seeing the characters that way, because it's often, sometimes you see more like cool shots than you even do in the film, which isn't a dig on the film. We all know that Greg Fraser did an amazing job with the cinematography, but stuff like shots like that really remind me of just the eye candy you get and imagining being a fly on the wall on set.
I was approached while I was in post-production for War for the Planet of the Apes. And when I was first contacted by Warner Brothers, I didn't understand what the meeting was for. So
this takes me back to 2017. Do you guys remember, like, when Matt Reeves was just barely talking about the Batman, and he had, you know, the whole, oh, you know, it's going to continue on Ben Affleck's The Batman story and everything like that. What, in the grand scheme of things, it's not a crazy long amount of time ago, because this channel started taking off, like, when I created it around 2017. I technically created it, like, Christmas 2016, but do you know what I mean? Like, boom, my whole channel's life is flashing before me, because, again, Matt Reeves' 2017 comments that maybe you're seeing on screen right now were some of this first stuff to come out about what that Batman was going to be.
So I kept turning it down, and then finally my agent called me one day and he said, listen, that general meeting with Warner Brothers, it's not a general meeting, it's about Batman.
Imagine if he just kept on turning down the meeting, like Warner Brothers keep knocking at the door. Yeah, no, I just turn them down. I'm busy. I'm in post. Not a general meeting, man. You kind of need to pick up this call. And thank God he did.
I was just starting Christopher Nolan's movie Tenet, and then 2 days later would have to come back to do the Batman screen test. Yeah, it was like a super high.
What a busy time for Pattinson. Like, imagine going on to a Christopher Nolan set. You know, you're quite a big character in the movie, and then just 2 days later, you have to go do a screen test for the Batman, to be the next big name Batman.
High pressure scenario.
Yes, very
You know,
high
auditions
pressure.
are always, they're strange and they're scary and you're nervous. They have a proper camera, but it's cool because you kind of get a taste of what it will really be like on set.
So what I really like about this, and kind of feel a bit, I wouldn't say melancholy about this, like, oh, I wish we saw that. We obviously see Robert Pattinson here doing the screen test to put the bat eye makeup on, and that's a shot they actually used in the film. But we've also got camera tests here for Zoe Kravitz's Catwoman, and so it's a shame I mean, I'm trying to not complain, because, you know, we got the Batman camera test, which was amazing. We got our first glimpse at the score. I think this is a leaf out of a notebook look that every bloody director should take. I'm looking at you, James Gunn. Why not give us the red cape flapping with a massive fan off screen of David Corenswet? Put John Murphy's rough score on it, even if it's not done, just like Greg Fraser's wasn't done at the time, but it was still epic. Why can't we get that? It would garner hype. Sure, you get a lot of people being like, haha, look at this. This camera test is awful. But you see what I mean. But anyway, back on point before I tangent too much. I wish we saw Selina Kyle, but at least we did get Batman. But they obviously did camera tests as we're sitting on screen right now with Selina Kyle as well.
Yeah, they gave me a motorcycle helmet and I had to take the helmet off, which was my biggest fear, was like, I'm gonna get stuck with the helmet. And I was like, that's how I lose this job. But Rob was half in a bat suit. It was like this kind of like in-between worlds. Like we were almost there, but not quite.
I mean, the whole thing is terrifying. I mean, I was putting on the suit from Batman Forever, and for one thing, the suit is pretty old. It's been in storage for a while. It's also incredibly precious. If I even slightly exert myself, I'm pouring sweat. And also just trying to figure out how to project a performance through a mask, basically. It's kind of, you realize pretty quickly that this is way harder than a normal part.
You know, I would love to see a behind-the-scenes photo of him wearing that suit. That'd be pretty crazy, because obviously, you know, we know what Robert Pattinson looks like in a bat suit, but to see him in like a completely different bat suit, especially from one back then, yeah, that would be quite a sight to see.
One of the things that distinguishes Batman as a comic...
I always like this concept art, like when it's, you know, somewhat animated, and you can also see like the early designs of the Batsuit here. Some designs of which I've seen some of you guys express that you would like to maybe even see implemented in an upgraded suit in the Batman Part 2. But obviously, this is still meant to be like a year 2 suit right here. There's not massive changes. Obviously, the symbol is quite different. We've been over the symbols before. They did so many drafts of the symbol they could have gone for. I really like the one they did go to in the movie, and I hope it doesn't change. You know, I could talk all day and all night, so you have to bear with me here with my tangents, but it's a difficult thing, isn't it, when thinking about an upgrade for the Batsuit, because you have like Christopher Nolan in Batman Begins do that really nice bat symbol. I really like it. But then for the Dark Knight suit, not only did the suit drastically change, but they also changed the bat symbol itself quite dramatically. And I kind of hope that they don't do that for whatever potential upgrade we could get for Robert Pattinson's The Batman Part 2 suit, if we're going to get a significant upgrade at all, because, you know, there's a lot of debate about that. It's like one side of the fence saying, well, of course we will, you know, merchandising as well. At the very least, they're going to want some new toys in there, a new look in some way. And then some people like myself, even though I'm a bit in between, or while I would like and dig an upgrade, if that's what they want to do, I really do like the suit as it stands. So, all while I think it's inevitable, there is going to be some changes. I would want the bat symbol to like stay the same. If they were to change it, maybe they could take out the tactical knife, even though I think that's a really innovative and unique design of a bat symbol, something that is usable. But if they just wanted to turn it into an actual symbol, maybe like keep the same kind of pattern on it and angles and stuff, but make it like a seamless kind of thing that's like attached on there firmly. But then again, you know, they might not do that because, you know, Bruce in this version likes using that symbol practically.
Superhero relative to most of the others is Gotham.
God, I love Jeffrey
That's
Wright.
very recognizable, obviously styled off largely New York. And so he's grounded in a way that's kind of uniquely relatable.
Matt was very, very clear saying he wanted to make this is a detective story, that right from the beginning. And so you think, okay, so he's the greatest detective in the world. What makes a good detective?
Well, the kind of guy who doesn't look at the photos of the mayor and the penguin coming out of the iceberg lounge and doesn't think to look where the photos came from. That's the world's greatest detective. No, but I'm joking. Nitpicks aside here. I'm obviously a huge fan of this, and I only want to see more of this in Part 2, which, guess what? You know, surprise, surprise, with Matt Reeves calling it this Batman epic crime saga universe, that is undoubtedly going to continue, which is what makes the speculation so thought-provoking when we talk about this in the discussion series, which is why I even think it still gets half-decent views and, comments from you guys in the community, because we're really in love with this vision, this detective Batman trilogy, if you will. And it's very thought-provoking. Where do they go next? If they're maintaining, this noir detective feel for Pattinson's Batman, what kind of story and investigation can you do for the second movie that doesn't retread things too much in a similar way as what you did in the first movie, while introducing a new Rogues Gallery character, which may not be super fantastical, but if you're not going to do that, how do you not make them just a simple murderer, but yet still very faithful to the iterations and character traits that make up those beloved Rogues Gallery villains for that of Batman? So who is it going to be? I know you guys have got your ideas, whether it's Hush, Clayface, frickin' Mr. Freeze, to whoever else. We're going to have to wait and see. And, I've got quite an unpopular take here, but I do think that Matt Reeves should take a stab at unwinding one of the fantastical characters. And I call that quite a wild take, because a lot of people think that if you do that, they are no longer the character that they are, which I actually disagree with, because you can look at an example with Clayface. So if you're the type of person or fan to say something like, oh, if you didn't make Clayface a giant shape-shifting Clayface mud monster, then they wouldn't be the character they are, when in fact the original version of that character, the Golden Age Clayface, was literally a serial killer, which they actually most recently did. I believe it was in episode 2 of Batman Caped Crusader, and that didn't take away from Clayface. Now granted, Caped Crusader still used, I would say, walking the fantastical line of actually making his face very unrealistic, mud monster like, but they didn't blow him up to that of a massive morphing mud monster like you see in the comics. So they found like a happy middle ground, and I think Matt Reeves should do the same thing. Like, go bold enough in this universe, because I think 98.9% of us, or maybe I'd lower it to 90%, understand that Matt Reeves isn't gonna do crazy fantastical things like that. However, I've always said that he might walk the line of what is really realistic, but yet also maybe kind of unbelievable, with regards to if he was to do Clayface, like Batman Cape Crusader, Golden Aged vibes, right? He could do unrealistic prosthetics, he could do some material that, as I've cited before, like Mission Impossible with whole face masks, things like that, right? Look what they've pulled off with Colin Farrell. If you had a villain in the Batman Part 2 who was hell-bent on that, they could make something work there. But, for example, the unrealistic nature of it would be another actor would actually be playing the Golden Age Clayface when he's in disguise to, make it that much more realistic, because obviously you can't get quite as convincing as you can with actually, getting another actor to play who's meant to be Clayface wearing makeup. If you get what I'm saying now. So all I'm saying is, whether it's Clayface, dare I say it, whether it's Poison Ivy or even Mr. Freeze, I think, as Matt Reeves has said himself, I think that would be like a great, I'm abbreviating here, but he said something like, I think that'd be a great challenge. I would love to figure out how we can make that work here. I think it could redefine one of the fantastical Rogues Gallery characters, even though off knee-jerk, impulsive reaction, a lot of people would be like, oh, they're going to screw this up. How can this character be this character without, the Poison Ivy traits or the Mr. Freeze traits that we are so familiar to attribute to them and what makes them fantastical? But I'm telling you, with this Batman epic crime saga, instead of doing a villain, say, like the Riddler, who is human and uses his intellect for his somewhat anarchy, I think they can do something even bigger. And I wouldn't be surprised if Matt Reeves went there. But anyway, Nick, back to the freaking video.
Is exceptionally observant.
I always think of filmmaking as a kind of, you're going on a search, and you're searching for the things that stick with you. On this movie, what started the process was I just started reading comic books. I went back to 1939, and I just basically did a deep dive in the comics, and anything connected, I just wrote down.
I love that. You would expect that from people working on movies, directors and stuff, but it doesn't always happen. And Matt Reeves taking a deep dive, even going as far back to the 1930s, like the Golden Age, it's now making me think, okay, so what could he have read and have written down that may not have made it into part 1, but could make it into part 2. Like, what's another villain back then that was highlighted? You know, like Golden Age Clayface and stuff, who he might think, you know what, I really think maybe I'm going to try and make this work here.
Basically, what the notebook is for me is a way to have a dialogue with myself, because otherwise I would just be saying these things and then I wouldn't remember anything. But if
That's really cool. Wait, so is he saying that I don't know if he necessarily wrote this Batman journal, the Gotham Project journal that Bruce actually has in the movie, and maybe he has a similar one outside of that. But you know, either way, whatever way it is, the one in the movie is reflective and emulates Matt Reeves' own scribblings of stuff. So I really like how he's talking about this.
But if I write it down and then I keep revisiting it, I start having a kind of document that shows what I'm interested in and what things, you know, sort of struck a chord with me, and eventually a story starts to emerge.
Man, what I would pay to get a hold of Matt Reeves' inner dialogue Batman journal. Can you imagine? The very thing that the story forms from.
I gave Bruce a notebook as well because I felt that he needed to have that kind of dialogue with himself. And I thought, wow, this is so Batman.
Which is, you know, I know I keep pausing, but that is one of my favorite things about the movie. And to the point of where I think they should step up the inner monologue in part 2. But they might not, because it does work really well as an intro thing and then as an outro thing to kind of touch base with Batman in of himself from the start and the finish of the story. If you were to do more, even though it would be very cool and fan servicey to people like me, it would kind of contrast the first movie quite a bit. It's like, okay, so why are we doing more now? You know, would it really fit in? I mean, it could always fit in, but maybe they should just leave it to the beginning and the end, as much as I would love to see more of that.
There's a sort of idea that he'd like him to be a bit like Kurt Cobain. So from that, I looked at lots of different images of Kurt Cobain and what the crossover was, who he becomes when he takes his cowl off. And the whole Kurt Cobain black eye makeup sort of really struck me, and I liked the idea that
Kurt didn't wear like a lot of black eye makeup, to be honest. Not really. I mean, there's a couple of photo shoot things that this is just my inner Nirvana fanboy coming out right now, but I wouldn't say he wore like, you know, Bruce Wayne, eye grease paint and stuff to put under the cowl. But I obviously totally acknowledge what they're talking about with Kurt Cobain. Always liked how, I mean, there was a lot of, you know, piss taking at the time that I remember people like, why is Bruce Wayne look like this? Why is he an emo? Well, you know, Kurt Cobain, Bruce Wayne, what? But I really dig the aesthetic. Like, if people apply, like, and remove any biases aside, whether they love this movie or hate this movie, it doesn't really matter. If you look at what Matt Reeves is doing here, it does make sense for like a workaholic Batman at this specific point, because obviously he very much so progresses and graduates this self-chained version of what he was into a bit more of like a, you know, free-flowing Batman who's still becoming by the end of the movie. But, you know, the kind of pent-up rock star, like recluse kind of Kurt Cobain influence on Bruce Wayne, which mirrors his vigilante activities. And if there isn't really so much like a Batman thing for him to do, he kind of ceases to exist in any other way, because at this point in time, he's not so in touch with his Bruce Wayne humanity. Even though that is there, it's not like the whole situation of, Bruce Wayne is just a mask. No, like that's kind of a big misconception. You know, Bruce is very much so there as well as Batman. It's just at different phases of Batman's career, I'd say, like super traditional canonical speaking wise. Sometimes the Bruce Wayne is very, very repressed at the beginning, until he kind of embarks a lot more out there in his crusade, which is something that Batman Caped Crusader, once again, with Matt Reeves producing on that as well, has done. He's very cold, he's very distant. There is no Bruce Wayne, other than the one difference it does from Matt Reeves as the Batman is that he really does use the Bruce Wayne socialite thing as a tool, which, you know, we could see happen in the Batman universe, even though I still struggle to believe or see this man as the playboy billionaire. Even in his Bruce Wayne attire that we saw him attending the funeral with in part 1, I can imagine him going out there and doing more things, attending events or like, you know, charity things, you know, sponsored by Wayne Enterprises and whatnot, but I don't see him accidentally tipping over bottles of champagne and ordering loads more and then taking a swim in the hotel lobby like Christian Bale's Batman did. That works with many Bruce Waynes, but I think this one will be, as I always say, like a happy medium as this Bruce Wayne grows a bit more confident in his Bruce Wayne public side. He will be a bit more middle ground like Batman Telltale, potentially.
He had the remains of his Batman makeup on and it looked very rock and roll.
Yeah, okay, so very rock and roll.
Spends a lot of time in darkness. That long hair really helped with creating that side of his character. At one stage we were talking about shaving all his hair off, and I'm glad we didn't go down that road.
Okay, so they were actually going to shave his hair off at one point. I don't know if that's something I've known and forgotten, or if I'm learning it for the first time, but that is crazy, you know, because that's such a drastic shift from the vision that we've had very much so told several times now, that they were going for this deliberate Kurt Cobain kind of aesthetic to Bruce Wayne. But the fact is, they were going to go for shaving it all off, maybe even having quite a buzz cut Batman. And this brings up, are they going to do that for the Batman Part 2? You know, if you could say that this hair and aesthetic for Bruce Wayne is quite symbolic of where he was at in Part 1, a kind of, albeit on the nose, development they could do for Part 2 to show the development is to, you know, bring him out visually a little bit more, not only through Bruce Wayne in public, but through his actual, you know, look. So maybe he has his hair shorter. I don't think it should be like buzz cut, but maybe stylized to, I don't know, Robert Pattinson's usual hair length. Maybe I'm showing a photo on screen right now. I think he could be very sharp looking like that as Bruce. And again, I think it's coming down to just the symbolic aspects of this. It's almost something at this point I think a lot of us are expecting. But I also wouldn't mind if they kept the hair the way it is, but I do low-key expect a haircut.
There's a film by Gus Van Sant called Last Days, which is kind of a fictionalized account of the last days of Kurt Cobain, and he's got all his stuff spread all over it. And I thought, well, this is the version of Batman and Bruce Wayne that I understand.
Yeah. I knew where he was coming from in this kind of slightly nihilistic...
You know who I am? You're Bruce Wayne. I want to see Carmine Falcone.
There's something more emotional and doesn't necessarily know that he's going to save the day. He doesn't know if being Batman is going to work or do anything. He knows that there is no other option. Basically, the options are kind of death or being Batman.
Yep.
Movie that Michael Giacchino and I have done. That to me is a very exciting collaboration. I love working with him.
Oh God, is this where the copyright's going to come in?
Rob was to screen test. He sent me a secret little MP4. It was both Bruce's theme and Batman's theme in this incredible suite. And I was blown away. It was so emotional. I drove to the set that morning, and Dylan Clark, my producing partner who was in this from the beginning with me, we're like brothers. I said, you have to get in the car. I said, what do you mean? I said, just get in the car.
And we sat in his car. I was in his passenger seat, and I didn't know what I was going to listen to. He goes, listen to this, and he pressed play, and you know it's Batman.
Can you imagine getting that first sneak peek? Like if Matt Reeves said to you, bro, get in the car, and then he just plays that. Like, I can only begin to imagine how exciting that must be working on a project like this, doing the next big thing, and then hearing Michael Giacchino's score for the first time. It's amazing. And God, the copyright.
I played it as Rob was putting that makeup on his eyes, and I was like, this is in the movie. We're doing this. That's where that scene comes from. It literally came out of Rob's audition.
Okay, good, cut.
It was one of those things where I just felt like this was a very special, fated day.
I bet.
But there we were listening to the music, knowing that he was going to put on this bat suit that was part of the history of Batman. It was just one of these things where you suddenly felt you were in a long line of history that meant so much.
And we can't wait for part 2, Matt. get on it, my friend. I mean, I know you are and you have been, and you know, you've got, you know, filming early next year apparently, and yeah, I need more. Like, I need, please. Now, up next is a little bit on the wingsuit. I don't know how much I'm going to show of this because this video is getting quite long already, but I definitely wanted to check it out just for where things could be at in part 2. And speaking of which, right at the beginning there, we get, I recognize that concept art very much so, because it is reminiscent of a wingsuit that I think people want to see in part 2, like with this progression. I know a lot of people didn't like the wingsuit in part 1, but again, I think going in, fully realizing what Matt Reeves was going for, I really loved, although it's not the most aesthetically pleasing Batman gliding system, right? You know, giving him a wingsuit in a world that they're trying to ground into like realism is a way of doing Batman that actually hasn't really been approached so much before, you know, without that of, you know, crazy technology where, you know, things become a bit more rigid and he can glide with the actual cape. Now, the cape in, you know, part 1 is actually the Batman wingsuit, but here you can tell it's the kind of cape and where you even have these animalistic kind of points to certain parts in the cape that are, you know, reminiscent of bat, you know, parts of the wing, and I assume that's like the heavier, maybe metal material of the cape that even allows it to become rigid to glide. But I think this would be, yes, an example of what people would like to see, you know, Bruce progress with technology-wise in the second film.
All right, here we go.
But I still really like this design. I really do. It's a cool way of doing it.
You have any idea what kind of trouble you're in?
Such a good scene.
When he puts on a bat suit, he isn't Bruce, he's Batman. It is transformative to Bruce, kind of elevates him as a creature, like a wraith.
Like a wraith. I like that. Good old comics. Amazing panels.
In some of the previous Batman comics, you find Batman jumping off a building, and miraculously the cape becomes like a hang glider, a huge kind of thing. You have to suspend your disbelief for a little bit for those moments.
I mean, he's right. Comics are inherently suspending a lot of disbelief. So when you're like deciding, okay, how fantastical are we going to go with our iteration, and maybe not so much with the Batman, yet you don't want to extinguish what makes some larger-than-life fantastical parts of this character so popular, what do you do? So even with this here, it's a very practical, old kind of Batman glider, but, you know, what, does he have, like, 200 of these around the city? Does he, like, glide from rooftop to rooftop? Has he mapped out his course and he picks up another one, then jumps off the next rooftop? Do you know what I mean? So the wingsuit is a very organic way to have gone about it. But that doesn't, you know, rule out any upgrades of stuff in this universe either, because you can most certainly do that as well. For example, like how Lucius Fox tackled it in The Dark Knight. That feels like a way where it's like, okay, maybe there is some material that we could do in this world. It might cost millions of dollars, but like maybe we could make it go really rigid, and then you can do that kind of thing. And maybe they could do something similar in part 2.
He can step off the edge of a building and he can glide down to safety. That presents a little bit of a problem in a movie like ours where we're trying to be super realistic and super grounded. So
there you go. Like they said it themselves, super realistic and super grounded. I think I highlight that because to this day, I keep getting people saying otherwise. Like they would actually do a flying poison ivy with vines that have erupted from the Gotham Street tarmac that cars have been riding on, flying her about. You're not going to get that, which is why I think they should go balls to the wall. And if they want to, and I've got a whole series on this, by the way, adapting the Rogues Gallery in Matt Reeves' Batverse. So how do I think Matt Reeves, with everything he's described about his vision for this world, quite realistic, but not opposed to unwinding the fantastical. I've gone over Ivy, Mr. Freeze, and maybe another character, I can't remember, in how I think they could actually make it work. So I think they need to do that. I think they really should do that. Whether we get that in part 2 or not, because obviously Penguin's going to be quite a big thorn in Batman's side, and his elevated status as the new kingpin of, you know, Gotham's criminal underbelly will probably have him play a large role and possibly even hire or work with whoever this new Rogues Gallery villain's going to be. So we might not get what I'm talking about, maybe a more fantastical yet grounded version of that fantastical Rogues Gallery character until maybe part 3, if we get that at all. But I think they should take a stab at it. It's quite risky, but people could be like, you know what, I didn't think they could make this work, but they've actually made it work in a really cool way. Maybe you're asking yourself that now, because you might have thought before this, Boba, I really don't think they should do that. But now, you know what? Maybe they could. Maybe they could.
Super grounded. So Matt's idea was that rather than it being like a rigid glider, maybe his cape and his suit could become a wingsuit.
I wanted to sort of take it and ground it. And so I started looking at wingsuits. And I was like, oh, it'd be really cool if we could figure out a way to take the wingsuit and make it part of his suit. I wanted the audience to feel like, oh, I could be Batman.
That is cool. Like, I don't get how people don't find that cool.
When I first met
I don't get it.
the director in Los Angeles, he mentioned a scene in the movie where Batman escapes from the Gotham police station by jumping off the roof of this very tall building.
And you can tell here with each concept art that we keep looking at of these versions, the cape is very different. That's not a wingsuit. That's like, you know, what we were talking about that he might upgrade to.
And his cape and bat cowl turns into a wingsuit. What was important for him is he wanted to really feel that it was Robert Pattinson who was running off and jumping off the building, and we never left Robert until we landed on the street.
Yeah.
In our movie, you will believe a man did fly. That this actually...
Pre-production meeting, December 6th, 2019. So they would be, just to give you some crazy insight, well, it's not crazy insight, but just to think of it for a second. They started filming in 2020. So this production meeting relative to part 2 would be happening like around about now. Like literally, you know, because if they're going to be filming in early 2025, the set building stage does take, you know, for the first movie, it took around 4, 5, 6 months, you know, give or take. Yeah, I know it took like 5 or 6 months because I know they started filming January of 2020, very aware of the COVID stuff, but they started building sets, I believe, the summer before that in 2019. So that's months upon months upon months of work. So that's why, you know, looking and poking around behind the scenes of part 2, when scoopers or whoever, or such as myself may talk about it, I take into account of if there's been any whispers in the wind of, you know, those who would work on building sets for part 2, because if they haven't even started that, it gives you a good indication that the movie's not even going to start filming for at least another chunk or block of time until what would normally take for those sets to be built, and then they can start filming. So if they are gearing up to do that soon, which they would have to be, you know, because I'm going to just say March of 2025 is when they start filming. Anyway, yeah, this meeting could be going on right now. And man, what it would be like to be a fly on that wall.
Happened. Here's just a glimpse of a previs in an early stage, but just to give you the idea of what we're going for. We're going to shoot it in a visual style that people accept as what is real based on YouTube videos. The idea is to get the kind of angles that you could get from GoPros. Even the idea of hitting the ground, we're going to
So that, like, everything was very similar in that previs, as it kind of should be, because when you do that, you kind of do try and emulate it in the movie shot for what you did. But here, he doesn't, like, he still hits, like, the top of this bus or whatever it is, but in the movie, kind of, like, almost, he hits, like, the underneath of this bridge or whatever it is. A lot of people think that he hit his face, by the way, but he didn't. If you slow it down, like, the metal armor padding of his chest hits the ceiling of the object that he smashes into. So his head doesn't actually get as injured as what you'd think, even though, yes, like Batman took a massive beating here.
Ground, we're going to soften the ground and pull him on a line, and then when he stands up, it's going to be Rob Pattinson, and you're going to like, he just did that.
Yeah. It was very immersive.
We had a custom wingsuit built based on a Batman design, but that was actually like a proper wingsuit that could be flown.
It has to have specific air channels running in certain places, so in the middle of the body, down the sides of the arms. One of the longest processes was trying to work out how the wingsuit was going to deploy from the costume.
I figured that Batman thought, okay, well, maybe in the right circumstance, I might be able to use this thing, but it wasn't really fully thought out.
We did it very real at first, and as much as you would have to...
I mean, that makes sense. Like, it's Batman who is still becoming... It's like, yeah, I've done training for wingsuit stuff. I've got my own Wayne, blah, 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 to develop this. It's custom. but haven't really fully thought it out, or haven't really maybe done this as much as I would like to. So yeah, I may deploy the parachute way too low for what would be realistic, and so I'm going to get into a massive accident.
To zip it up, Matt was then worried about the transition and it being quick enough, so then we had to think of another way of how we could do it quicker and maybe in a more gadget kind of way.
We assumed that the wingsuit would just be one of those Batman moments where it just turns into the wingsuit and off you go.
It was kind of deployed a bit like an airbag or a life jacket, so that it comes around quite quickly.
Yeah. See, that's quite different from what actually happens in the movie. I respect the effort that they put into it, because you see he pulls this thing, it kind of engulfs him a bit, it gets quite a lot of air in it, but in the movie you can tell that when he pulls the tab, it immediately surrounds him. It's almost like they got rid of the practical effort they put in to kind of remask over it and do the CGI of the cape just surrounding him. They obviously probably used it as a frame of reference, but it's no way near as baggy and engulfing as it was when he put it over himself. But I still, again, like, even with a grounded, realistic Batman like this, they're still going to walk the line of, you know, is this really so realistic? Can, like, we pull the tab and it just completely does that and he zips himself up and he's ready to go? In reality, that wouldn't be as easy. And, you know, the actual, you know, behind the scenes shows that, but it's still so cool to me how they made this work.
Originally, we wanted to actually hang a professional wingsuiter from a helicopter on a long line.
We talked to a wingsuit specialist and stunt guy, and we wanted to do a real jump.
But then we had the pandemic, we had other logistical challenges that made it so that was no longer...
They wanted to do a real jump. That's insane.
...longer a viable plan.
It was quite a challenge. What seemed like a really bright idea early on then turned into a massive headache about how to film it in a cinematic way. We couldn't change the style of our movie to suit that wingsuit. It had to flow through and it had to feel like it was all integrated.
So we've ended up doing it in several locations using several different techniques.
And I remember, like, yesterday when these photos were coming out, that's crazy. I remember doing, like, breakdown videos for, like, Batman dangling off the edge of this building. Oh man, that's insane. And to think like, this time next year, we would have seen a whole bunch of new filming.
Batman, he's on top of the building. He's run up away from the police, and he gets into his wingsuit. He's just about to do the jump. So we have a stunt Batman up the top there, on a wingsuit, on a wire, on the ledge.
Eventually, we switched to a set on one of the sound stages, and we pushed a ton of air at it.
And then we cut to a drone plane in Chicago.
We flew a drone down LaSalle Street, and we had it shoot kind of forward, and we had it shoot backward.
These have been stitched together in a 360-degree cyclorama, which we're projecting through 8mm panels.
The stuntman and Rob were able to pilot what was a wingsuit wind tunnel.
It's crazy how much work goes into this. It's insane.
And then eventually we switched over to a backlot set. We had a stunt performer do a fairly big stunt where they rolled and tumbled.
With a wingsuit, your rate of descent is extremely fast. So in that case, we can't muck around. He's got to come down pretty quickly, and it's brutal. So again,
and that's one thing I really liked, is that a lot of people I've noticed haven't realized that the actual fall that happens on the street is actually done. And I know it's stunt work, but it looks still like that would really hurt.
And back to this grounded reality, he's not going to land there in a superhero pose. Yeah. He lands there and he hurts himself.
Yeah. And there we have it. Ooh.
By the time that you get to the end of the scene, that you would say, like, oh my God, everything had to be sort of rough and visceral and hard, but also completely believable.
You definitely have like a broken
theme ahead. We were trying to take all these visual cues from real events, which were these wingsuiters, so that you could put the audience in this journey with Batman, so that you could feel like, oh my God, I took that flight with him.
And it makes me think, like, what are they going to do for part 2? Are they really going to elevate a lot of his tech, or are they going to keep it grounded in reality so the audience can feel like maybe the imperfections of what Batman is still doing? Or should there be still a actual upgrade with this Batman, as you would expect? Oh man. And there you have it, the stunt and then the actual movie bit. That's brilliant. But as I was saying, like, we want upgrades. I know a lot of people do. And so should they be, as they said earlier, you know, with the wingsuit coming out, should, you know, it's one of those things you just expect to pop out and there you have it. Should we be getting more streamlined, more smooth Batman professionalism there? Or would you still like the approach of how, yes, he's made a massive journey in part 1, he's grown a lot more as a character, but gadgets and implementation like that, especially if it's only taking place a couple of months or so after part 1, so more or less immediately after the Penguin series, as we have learned, would there really be such a drastic change in smooth technology? I feel like they're going to keep it pretty rusty still in all of the best ways. Like, you know, the Batmobile, sure, there might be 1 or 2 cool new gadgets that I've speculated about before, but in the James Bond way, something minimal, something that, you know, he presses a button, something cool comes out or whatever it is in another car chase, or maybe, you know, a cool innovative thing to do would be to like eject from the Batmobile car seat or something, and then he can like deploy maybe a slightly upgraded wingsuit. That would be amazing. You know, like Batman Arkham Knight, where you can just fly out of the Batmobile. That is something that would be grounded in reality still and would be awesome. Like, there's probably things like this that they're thinking, like, as Matt Reeves kept reiterating here, like, how can we make the audience feel like, oh, you know, he did that, like, we did that, like, you're in the shoes of the character. As Matt Reeves goes on about extensively, he feels like it's so important to be in the point of view perspective of the character, which is why he does that both narratively, but also visually when following this batsuit, wingsuit glide here, for example. But he's probably thinking in part 2, how can I do that in other ways? But I don't expect super smooth technology changes. That would be pleasantly surprising. You know, so there is the suit, of course, and you could say, okay, now he's going to get more gadgets. He blew up the pipe that let smoke come out, so in part 2, he's naturally thought, well, I'm going to carry some smoke pellets around with me for a bit of deception and theatricality in my fights. Why didn't I think of that before? Why did I have to wait to burst the pipe to come up with that idea? So I expect things like that, but to then go to a leap between part 1 and part 2 within the span of a small frame of time, you know, because we know it's picking up right after the Penguin. I don't think there's going to be, you know, don't expect, I don't know, just crazy leaps and bounds of like, okay, so we saw this Batman in part 1, but now I'm ready for the white eyes, you know, holographic interface on his gauntlet Batman. I don't think we're going to be quite there, but they're going to find really inventive and cool ways to do things like this from what they did in part 1, but in part 2, with maybe a couple of cool surprises in there as well, that he whips out and has just been working on simultaneously in the background. Like, batarangs are a thing in the concept art Batman. Like, they were literally designing them. Please, can we get those? I don't see why not. It could be like a, you know, thing that he's trained and practiced in relentlessly, so he's got really good accuracy when wounding. Like, if you just threw a batarang at some thug's, like, calf muscle, it could incapacitate them. It still meshes with, like, the limits of how brutal this Batman's willing to go. You know, things like that would be awesome, and tangible upgrades that would be felt, because there were no batarangs in part 1, but I know some of you want not just batarangs, but we're talking like out of this world Batman upgrades, but we're gonna have to wait and see. But ladies and gentlemen, that is where I'm gonna leave it in today's bonus retrospective, the Batman video. I thought there's not so much of the Batman universe stuff going on. We're in between episodes of the Batman discussion series, so I was like, you know what? Bonus content for the Bat family on the channel. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, not only let me know your thoughts on everything discussed in the videos and then what I perhaps had to say about it, but let me know if you would like to see more of these in the future, because there's quite a few more that I can pull from and create a bit of a conversation about. But looking forward to see what you guys have to say down in the comments below. Consider subscribing if you haven't done so already. But until next time, I'm gonna love you and leave you. So thank you so much for watching. I hope you guys have a lovely rest of your day, and I'll see you fellow Bat family in the next video. Goodbye.